All right. Hi there. This is Kelly Janae with Ridge to Reefs, and we are interviewing Dustin Snow, a farmer in American Samoa who's recently built an inoculated deep litter system, which is a type of piggery that uses natural materials for absolutely no pollution. So we're going to learn more from Dustin today about that system. Dustin, do you mind giving us a quick introduction of yourself before we get started with some questions?
No problem. My name is Dustin Snow. I've been living in American Samoa for the past 12 years. Um, my intention of coming out here was always to be farming. I did a lot of greenhouse farming. Um, for a number of years, I ran a CSA out here, community supported agriculture. Over the last 4 to 5 years, I've been running with pigs lately. So it's been about 4 years since I've had live animals at my farm. It was mostly plants and hydroponic greenhouses before that, but now I'm doing both, and I'm running an inoculated deep litter piggery, which is outstanding results so far, and I'm just in my infancy with it. And any questions you have about that, feel free to ask.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, so could you give us your kind of high level definition of what the inoculated deep litter system is?
Sure. It is for for all intents and purposes, it looks like a pond. If you can imagine a brick wall all the way around, about 3.5 feet tall, lined with rubber. So as you would fill a pond with water, it's basically that. But instead of putting water in it, we start with a layer of gigantic logs, then medium logs, and then I put a lot of, it's all organic matter and carbon-based things like coconut husk and wood chips. Those are like kind of the very top layer that I've noticed are do really well. And it's basically a lasagna style of farming with the pigs and layering everything, and that's what's working so well. It reminds me of a giant composter, really.
Right, so it's essentially like a compost in place piggery that is a layer cake of a lot of natural materials, right?
Yeah, I look at it more of a lasagna than a cake, but
Lasagna
that's
than a
all
layer
right.
cake. All right, well, I got a sweet tooth and you like it
and
savory, so
yeah,
whatever your
and
flavor.
the layers, there's different things that are happening in there, and the layers, I mean, I guess it's kind of what you have around you that you can use, but the different things that I use is just basically what's at hand. And I've learned a lot too, because the layering of the things, after I've cut down some of these trees and things like that, this is all secondary growth. It's not an old growth rainforest by any means. It's been cleared, oh, maybe about 10 years ago. So it's all secondhand growth, and putting all that material in there, I just realized this. It clears a way for me to grow a whole lot more bananas and fruit trees that I end up feeding the pigs too. So that's a really cool concept. That is one of the concepts that I learned with this, with making that the layers of lasagna like that. And I also inoculated it too with oh geez, I think I used 4 or 5 different types of inoculation methods with my lasagna that I made.
Yeah, how
One of
exactly did
them,
you do that? I'm curious with the inoculating the
yeah,
system.
one of the ones that I did was a half cooked rice. It really brings in a lot of microbiology and things like that from the surrounding area. Um, so I basically, as you would be feeding chickens, I just spread it around and let it kind of go in as I was doing layers. Another inoculant that I used was fish meal. Fish meal is a powder of, it's a byproduct of our fishing industry out here. And so it's a powder with all the bones and all the leftover meats and things like that ground into a dry powder. And that also is a breeding ground for lots of beneficial bacteria, things like that. And then what I think the most important one that I added was leaf litter from the jungle, from the forest around me. I'm backed up into a really beautiful rainforest there. And so what I would do is I would take a trash can and I would rake up all the leaves and all the dead rotten wood, things like that that are all laying where all that microbiology is going on in the jungle there. And I spread that around, and that really breathed a whole lot of life into it.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. So the inoculation then, can you describe a little bit to our listeners what that is? So I'll just recap what you said. So this inoculated deep litter system, it's essentially a deep bed of a layer or a lasagna of different kinds of organic materials that you're finding on your property. And apparently this is, good for the ecosystem. Some people might think, oh no, we're cutting down trees. But for you, it's actually beneficial because you have more room to grow fodder for your pigs who you can then raise. And essentially, the benefit of this system, right, is that it's a compost in place system. And the issue that we're addressing is wastewater pollution, right? We don't want
Correct.
the waste in the soil from the pigs to be washing off into the nearby streams, which is something that happens quite frequently in American Samoa with the type of piggeries that are there. So then this inoculation piece of it, you're taking indigenous microorganisms from the natural environment using a couple of different methods. And what exactly does that do to the system? Why is that beneficial?
So the indigenous microbiology here, I'm sure you can go, they sell products of microbiology off island and stuff like that, but I prefer to use what's at hand here. So by raking up on the bottom of the under the canopy of the forest, you're collecting all these microbiologies, all these fungal microbial life forms, and then you're putting it in to accelerate your compost. And then the pigs, something to remember is pigs are always working, whether it's with their nose rooting around, stepping on things with their feet. And they're kind of like, a lot of people, you have to turn your compost every couple of weeks or whatever. These guys are doing it all the time, and so it's constantly churning around and mixing all that microbiology in there and allowing it to spread out and do its thing and be alive in there. And then you get a lot of benefits from that. There's no odor, there's no flies, there's there's that's just the health of the animals is what's really at stake, and that's what you really see. I see my pigs growing faster. I mentioned that there was no odor, there's no flies, there's so many benefits to it. There is one issue that I'm dealing with now, but I have it licked, is that it's too dry. Because in order to have a system like this, you need to have a cover. Otherwise, that pond that we were talking about would be that. It would be a swampy pond, and rain would catch in there, and it would be. So having a roof is one of the most essential parts to an inoculated deep litter piggery. And so having that roof on there, there's the other side of that coin, is that it's not, the microbial life is not getting the water that it normally gets in our jungles and rainforests here. Normally, we're raining. Sometimes it rains for 2 to 3 weeks at a time. Sometimes it's every other day. Sometimes you'll have it 2 weeks off, whatever. So the microbial life has adapted over time to have certain levels of moisture, to be able to deal with certain levels of moisture. So now that I've been running for, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 months or something like that, I'm noticing that I'm too dry in there. My solution is really quick and simple, and it's beneficial for my whole farm, is to collect the rainwater from that roof that's essential for the piggery. That rainwater gets collected and put into, I have a really big water tank, and I've elevated that so it's up. So I got a gravity fed rain catch. So it's within the system. It's making its own water that I could then spray on there once a day. As you check on the animals, you spray it in there a little bit. You miss a day or two, that's not a big deal, but you kind of got to keep those moisture levels right to feed the bacteria. I noticed I started doing that a little bit, and I noticed the compaction of the compost or lasagna or whatever. It's really increased a lot, because you could tell it's all alive. The moisture's in there, and things are breaking down faster than they are when they're bone dry. So you're basically mimicking what's going on in nature. I
Gotcha.
didn't see
Yeah.
that one coming, and then now that it's there and we're up and running, it's one of those things. It's like, okay, now we know what's going on.
Yeah, that's a really interesting challenge because one of the main, issues with the system is if it gets too wet, then it basically can turn into a swamp, like you said, which is going to create smells and it's, basically going to render it unusable, at least for a little bit of time before it dries up. But it seems like it's a little too dry, which is, in American Samoa, something that is recommended is that for these IDLS systems, that there's a big roof overhang so that those driving rains don't get into the system. But like you said, the indigenous microorganisms are adapted to a moist environment. And I would imagine that the urine from the pigs would be one of the main sources of the moisture, but it seems like there's just not enough of that to, I mean,
No,
it's
not
a
enough of it.
4 foot deep bed of material, right?
Correct. The urine is definitely not enough, and it's probably not the the number one thing that those microorganisms would want to have as moisture. The pH levels, whatever, wouldn't be correct in there. And so I'm quite certain that the fix is to give them a, and the animals like it anyways, to give them a squirt every day. They like it. In the middle of the day, you squirt it down. I got my 3-year-old daughter. It's one of her favorite things to do is to squirt the pigs. So stand there with their hose and squirt the pigs, and it's like, hey, everybody's winning on that one. And
Well,
so
it's
there
really
is
a
something
thing.
satisfying about that as a farmer to wash them down. It cleans them up, and yeah, it's kind of fun.
Yeah, yeah. So let's dial back a little bit then and go to kind of the reasons why you chose to construct this IDLS system. What are the benefits of it that you like, and how does it compare to some of the normal ways that pigs are grown as a whole in American Samoa,
Sure.
and also how does it compare to how you were growing pigs before?
So, in American Samoa, one of the most popular ways is called a washdown, and it's basically a cesspool. It's terrible because the pigs are living on concrete, and then they wash all the feces and urine down a trough. Some places have a septic of some sort, but most of them do not. They have a cesspool, and very it's very bad for your groundwater, drinking water, streams, ecological, even I would say disease issues. If you got mosquitoes going to a cesspool, that's a vector right there, and that's just dangerous. And most of the time, these piggeries are going to be close to your house or where you're living, and so I'm quite certain that this is a way to eliminate that, like all of those right there, because with the roof, there's no water that's going to get in there. Um, so you'll have everything will be contained, and I've even developed a way that I can pump water out if a hurricane comes and my roof gets blown away or whatever. I've developed a little system just simply by using a circle of logs to pump out water in case of an emergency. Or another thing I was thinking, if the pigs sometimes break the water pipe, it could start filling up your pond. So when I do construct my water, because right now I just use a drum for the water, a drum with the drinking nipples on it. When I do construct my permanent water system, it's going to be with steel pipe so that can't happen. Because if you use a PVC pipe, something plastic like that, pigs are strong. They're always working. Like I said, they're going to break that pipe, and you could have a nasty swamp if that happens. So that's one of the things we're trying to do, or that I'm seeing in the future as I build this thing and experience firsthand what's happening with it. So a lot of these piggeries out here, there was an attempt several years back to do dry litter piggeries, which is where you're always putting in wood chips and then you're taking them out once the fecal load or whatever is too high, and then you can compost it from there. They were having a problem with maintaining the amount of wood chips to provide to the farmers, and so a lot of those guys, they just simply cut out a little piece of the wall and turn it into a washdown piggery, which is exactly what the project did not want to do. So that's one of the issues that I see, that was happening before, and that we're overcoming with this IDSL picture.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I actually have some photos here of a dry litter piggery that we visited at the um, the American
Yep, there
Samoa
it is.
Community College.
Uh-huh.
And this is essentially, you can see this, right, Dustin?
Yep. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so this is kind of the dry litter piggery part of it, where all of the waste from the dry litter would be pushed into this trench here, and then it would be shoveled into these bins, which already is kind of a lot of work, right? Like you said, it's the turning of the compost and there's the shoveling of, the manure and everything. But it's compounded by the fact that there's actually really not any wood chips on island that can be used. So essentially what happens is this.
Yeah.
um, and this is what most of those dry litter piggeries have kind of turned into, is going back to the original way that, well, maybe not even the original way, because originally probably the pigs were just living on the earth, right? Not on concrete systems. So now it becomes this, unsanitary conditions for these pigs. And then you can see here that they kind of wash it down. And then it just, I think on this system, it actually goes into a septic tank. In the dry litter systems, it would, but essentially, it could just be going straight down into the nearby streams. So it's wonderful that there's an option for the deep litter kind of system that does not have those issues, right? It captures all of
Yeah.
the waste in one place.
Yeah, that's the thing. And you mentioned about the labor. The deep litter piggery is so much less labor to do because the animals, so you mentioned that they got to wash it down, they got to shovel it over into those compost and things like that. The pigs are already doing that. Those pigs naturally work all day long. They're always rooting and digging, and that's the type of animal that they are. It's kind of interesting to note that what used to happen, when I want to say when my wife's mother was a child, is that the whole village would have a giant rock wall circle. They would just pile rocks in a huge circle, and everybody would keep their pigs in this one area. Certain people would do that; would be their job, things like that. And that's how it used to be. And then even over in Apia, oftentimes it's a lot bigger land and things like that. Oftentimes people they actually allow their pigs just run around wild, and they feed them every day. They'll feed them out in the dick. So they're not having a huge impact in such a small area as some of these other systems that we've developed here. It's kind of a cultural thing. But with this deep litter piggery, you got it all right there where nothing's leaving. You got a lot less work. I've been noticing, like I said, with the compaction, is that I have to add more wood chips, add more coconut husk, things like that, as it breaks down. But once it's all broken down, and I imagine, I don't know exactly how long this takes, maybe a year, maybe 3 years, you're going to have really good, um, not well, I guess you could call it compost or mulch. That's going to be very beneficial. One of the things when I was looking at those photos you just showed me, I'd imagine that those guys are not on rainwater, so we have a very heavy chlorinated water system out here for municipal water. So one of the things that I'd like to point out is how important it is to catch your own rainwater, because all that chlorine is designed to kill microorganisms. So by having just, you're not going to have that breakdown of compost of life, of microbiology happening unless your moisture source is from natural rainwater, because the chlorine is just designed to kill microorganisms.
That is an excellent point and something that we need to keep in mind as we're building these systems, especially in places where they're already connected to the municipal water system. And
Yeah.
there's so much rain in American Samoa, so might as well use
There's too
that.
much, Kelly.
Yeah, so we got to catch some of it. Keep it under
I'm really
control.
excited about my I'm on the last little couple of little steps of putting in the rain gutter and then doing the plumbing for my 840-gallon elevated gravity fed rain collection system that could actually, it's going to go for my entire farm, because I'm up high, up on the highest area of my farm is where this is. So everything's going to be gravity fed, and my entire farm, including my normal composting bin, is going to have rainwater as well.
That's amazing. I think
Yeah.
you sent me a video of your walkway and then the rainwater harvesting. I'll see if I can find it while we're chatting. Um, so tell me a little bit more about I know that there's many different kinds of watering systems and feeding systems that you can use. You said that sometimes the pigs can kind of break the watering systems if they're not steel. Is there anything special about what you have chosen to use in your system?
Well, right now I'm using a 55-gallon plastic drum with two watering nipples on it at different heights. Um, that's what I'm using right now. But from my previous experience, I've been using PVC as my water source for the animals to actually physically drink. And you can see behind the feeder in that photo is the drum. It's sitting on the corner there.
Hmm.
One of the things that's really important about your water is having it at the right height, because you want it to go directly down the pig's mouth, or down their throat, basically. You don't want them to have to stoop down and get it really low off the ground. It's just going to spill out everywhere and it's going to kind of cause more of a mess. So that's one thing that I've learned over the years and stuff, is to keep it at the right height, so that the pigs kind of put their head up right at that right height, and it goes right down, and it's just really efficient rather than making a big mud pile there. So keeping that height is good. I mentioned before that when I make this water system, I'm going to use steel pipe. Steel pipe, they won't be able to break it, and it'll last for forever, and it will avoid that huge swamp that I'm scared of that might ever happen.
Right.
So that's what I'm going with. That's what I've learned is the height of the water. Try not to use PVC, use steel pipe, and then yeah, and it's gonna be directly connected to my rainwater system.
Amazing. Makes a lot of sense. You've learned a lot over the years about how to have more efficient systems for your pigs, right? Because you've been raising pigs for how long?
5 to 6 years, and I just started by making a cage, and or not even a cage, using roofing iron and logs from the forest and things like that. Just try not to spend too much money on it, so that I could, as a farmer, you have to turn profit. So and as I built it up, I learned that with animals, you kind of really need to know how to weld. So with some of my profits, I bought a welding machine and I learned how to weld. And so it's just a natural progression on refining things and making it right, because at the end of the day, your farm, you can't spend money on your farm without making money. And that's one thing we got to keep in mind. And there's going to be different people out here culturally that are going to want their piggeries just to kind of give meat or pigs to their family, that aren't in it kind of as a proper as a farmer that raises his family off of the products that I make. So there's going to be that cultural aspect that happens out here where people aren't in it for the money, which is totally fine. And then there's people kind of more like me, where it's like, okay, I'm putting in money, value, resources, all these kind of things that I'm putting in. I have to make money to feed my family. So there's kind of a two types of farmers out here.
Right. And I'm curious from your perspective, would this kind of system, the IDLS, be beneficial to those who, or even possible for those who are doing this just for their families and not for a profit? Do you see it as being a cost-effective option for all kinds of farmers, or what kind of limitations do you see there?
That's a tough question, because there's such an initial investment with this type of, there's a huge initial cost with making this idea, inoculated deep litter system. There's a lot of money that has to go into making the walls, making the roof, the construction materials. I'm using steel. I mean, you could use wood, but most of the people that are going to be that are that are putting a piggery together, they're using what they have around them. So they're using logs from the forest, say, that are going to break down really fast, things like that. They're going to use old roofing iron. So you got to kind of have this standard that I'm a little bit worried about, that people are going to try to skip some of these very important steps. And in my eyes, I always look at the future, where it's like, okay, this is going to be here for a long time. It's not going anywhere. And if I do it right this one time, I don't have to do anything ever again, pretty much. So that's the beauty of it. But you gotta allow people to have that vision and see. I mean, I've been at this for about what, a year and a half, Kelly, something like that, and I'm still not completed on it. And I'm just kind of a one man. I come down and get some volunteers out and things like that. But I just been building it myself. So you got to think about those aspects when you're thinking about getting this island wide picture put together.
Right. Yeah, that's a really amazing point that a lot of people are gonna not want to spend a bunch of money on this project unless it's going to be something that's really going to make them some profit in the future. It's a huge initial investment. One of the positive things about what Ridge to Reefs and NRCS are doing and all the agencies working towards is that there will be the option for farmers to apply through NRCS for cost share for these systems. So that's beneficial. So if a farmer really wants to make a living doing this, then they'll have that option and almost, I think, 100% cost share with specific standards and specific engineering plans that includes like hurricane ties for the roof and making sure that the system is climate proof. So at least there's that option for people, though.
Yeah, I think that's good. And as long as the main steps do not get skipped,
Right.
it'll be a success. You got to keep there's some very important fundamentals that have to be there, otherwise it won't work. And so if we can nail those in the general scheme of everything as I'm working this out, then it will have a good success rate.
Yeah, and I'm curious, just off the top of your head, maybe we've talked about it already, but what are those considerations that those steps that you would definitely need to take to make sure that this system is effective?
The type of material, so steel is where it's going to be. If you make it out of wood, if you can imagine, you're making a giant composter that breaks down wood. That lasagna is designed to break down wood. So if you use wood as your construction material around it, you're gonna, especially where the contact of things are, then you're gonna have, it's gonna break down so fast. I mean, things will break down with termites and just everything. Wood just does not last out here. It's almost a waste of money sometimes. It's terrible, but so it would be the type of materials and making sure that simple things like the roof, access. I didn't think about it at first, but I needed to make a whole deck around or at least along one front side of mine. I had to make a deck. I couldn't get in there. You know what I mean? So I had to make stairs and a deck to make it comfortable where I could work there every day and my son could go we throw in banana leaves or whatever we're doing to kind of keep, you want to keep the daily routines easier for yourself. And so um, I was able to trade a pig for a bunch of used lumber so that I can make that deck. And that deck, it's going to last a little bit longer because it's not part of the system where the animals are, where the composting is all going on in there. So um, I would say choice of materials and making sure that there's a roof. And I now that I think about it, I think rainwater is key because if you use municipal water that's heavily chlorinated, I mean, they put a lot of chlorine in our water out here. You're going to kill all that microbiology and that's kind of defeating the purpose of the inoculation part of the deep litter.
Yeah.
So as long as we hit those standards as we're going and making sure we're sealing up this whole project to where it's all working and everything's working together, as long as those very important standards are met, we can make it an island-wide option.
Absolutely. Awesome. Yeah, and this is great that you're basically spearheading this, deep litter
Pioneer.
system. Yeah, I mean, you're the guinea pig of this, and it seems to be working pretty well for you so far, other than, these little things that you can only find out by doing it, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So you mentioned that your pigs are kind of healthy and happy. Can you describe a little bit more about, yeah, how you know that and what behaviors they have that seem to reflect that? And I'm also curious if people use antibiotics at all in American Samoa for their pigs, and if that would be the necessity of that would be reduced by using this kind of more natural.
Um, I have never ever heard of anybody using antibiotics out here. unless you cut your foot and you go to the hospital. So with any of the animals, that's never, I have never seen that out here, and that is just kind of not the style out here. But with my animals, the main thing that I do is deworm. So I use ivermectin, and because the internal parasite is one thing that you'll notice throughout the island. If people are not, you can tell by the health of the animals. They're a lot skinnier. The hair gets, the hair is lost and things like that. And so I have a regimen where I deworm my pigs. And lately, since the deep litter pig, the inoculated deep litter piggery that I have right now, it's just for the weaner pigs. So when you take the pigs away from their mother, once they're mature enough, they're eating food and things like that. They're still suckling, but they're eating food. And there's a certain age when I collect those pigs out of my existing piggery and take them up to my deep litter piggery, every single animal is dewormed before it goes in there. And so I noticed that the pigs are so much healthier. They're growing so fast compared to what I used to do. So the growth rate, that tells you something. I have video cameras, so I have a video camera. It's for two reasons. Just in case there's a thief that comes, because there's a lot of money in those pigs. So it's in case of that, but it's also I get to watch the animals in their natural behavior, because as soon as you walk up to the cage, the animals are going to kind of freak out. They're shuffling around. They're doing their thing. With a video camera, you can just watch them, and it's really entertaining, actually. Like every afternoon, they have this boisterous, we call it the mosh pit, where they run around and do circles and, like fighting, like natural play, I guess you would say. Not really fighting, but it's like, I can just tell as a farmer that this is where they need to be. This is happiness right here. Mm-hmm. And so that, along with the deworming and just the speed of growth, is how I know as a farmer that this is working really well.
That's wonderful to hear.
I'm really curious to see what happens on my next step, because first of all, I have to figure out how I'm going to get my sows, my bigger pigs, up there, and I'm kind of working on a design that's going to house the males and females in that same. If you look at the piggery that I have now, there's two other spaces. I've only got occupied 1/3 of my potential. And so in those other 2/3 is where I plan to have my sows. And so that's kind of my next step. Now that I've got this first one pretty much done, is getting the water system in place, and then figuring out what I'm going to do for the sows, because I want them out of that old system. I want to adopt this new system completely. And so you can see where that feeder is in that photo right there. That's the 1/3 that I do have, which is about 20 by 20 feet. And then I have two more of those. So I have 2/3 more to go.
I'm curious how long it took you to fill this one pen with the materials.
Oh, geez. It's a tough question, because I do a little bit here, I do a little bit there. Now that it's a really tough question, Kelly, because there was days when I did have help, there was days when I didn't have help, and there was days when it was just me and my son, there was days with just me, and then there was days when I had 5 people. I don't know how to clearly answer that, except for a week or two. I guess would be a vague answer.
Well, that's not as long as I would have expected. A week or two. Yeah. And you did harvest the materials from your land.
Yes.
If somebody didn't have, I guess a lot of people have a lot of trees on their properties in American Samoa.
Yeah, things grow so fast out here. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe there's
also a huge supply of coconut husk that's really not used much on island. It's just a little bit for firewood or umus or things like that. But if you go to somebody's, they call it an umu fale, it's a place where they cook outdoor foods. They do their traditional cooking. There's oftentimes a huge stack of coconut husk that they can only burn a little bit of it, and it's just a byproduct of using coconuts. And so that's readily available. there's tons of things. You could probably even go to the golf course and get the greenery from the lawn mowing. Everybody cuts their grass out here and they burn it. It's just what they do, and that's green waste going to waste in a way. So oftentimes I'll go to the rugby field when they're cutting in our village. We have a village rugby field. I'll go there and I'll get all that grass, and sometimes they're nice enough to even put it in a bag for me, so I can just pick up the bag and then I'll just take that there. So that if you're not lazy, there's 100 different resources to find carbon out here for your deep litter piggery.
Right, and reusing these natural materials is really, upcycling them is really one of the benefits of this kind of system, and it doesn't require importing anything,
It's all here.
It's all right here. So the final question I have for you is just, what would you tell another farmer if they were considering changing the way that they raise pigs, maybe from a wash down or a dry litter to a deep litter system? What would you tell them?
The main thing I would tell them is that number one is they're going to have less work on the daily. They're going to have more initial work to build this thing, but on their I don't know what the lifespan you could put on it. If you say you got it's going to be a 15-year lifespan for the building, whatever you can kind of estimate it all depends on your maintenance and things like that. But I would tell them that you're going to have a whole lot less work to do in the big picture. You're going to have to do an initial construction and filling of the deep litter, but the maintenance going to only, instead of washing down every day and creating a cesspool, all you need to do is once the carbonaceous material, I call it a carbon diaper, once that sinks down a little bit, you just got to throw some more on there. And that's a very simple thing that you don't have to do very often. It's just adding bedding to bring the level back up as it, things will break down and go down, and then you gotta top it off. And it's a really simple thing rather than what they would do every single day. And then you could talk about benefits to drinking water, groundwater, the effluent going out to the streams, which eventually goes to the reefs, and it just makes sense that your pigs are going to be healthier, and you will either make more profit or you will make more pigs with this system. So if your goal is to make more money, this system is it. If your goal is to make more pigs and healthier pigs for your family, this is your system.
All of that
less maintenance.
And less maintenance.
Yeah.
Sounds like a win-win. Well,
It
we're
is.
very curious to see how it all unfolds and as the years progress, as you continue using this system, and hopefully we'll get some more in the ground soon and continue ground truthing this type of system in American Samoa.
Great. I'm looking forward to it. I got a whole second phase I need to do with mine. And
yeah, the work never ends.
After I get my water system legit to where I like it, then I'm going to move on to figuring out how to get my sows and my boars up there, so it'll be one containment of an entire system of breeding and raising animals all under one roof.
Amazing.
With no flies, no odor, and healthier animals.
Well, that's something I think all farmers can get behind, right?
They should.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Dustin, for your time.
No worries.
And best of luck with raising all your pigs and everything else you do with your farm. All right. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, Kelly.